In this movie, I'll demonstrate how to work with the one remaining transform tool, which is the Reshape tool. Now, it's not nearly as old as the other tools. In other words, I want to say it showed up in Illustrator 6. And it doesn't work anything like the other tools. You can't bring up a dialog box, for example, but it is grouped with those tools. So notice if I were to click and hold on the scale tool right here, we would see the Reshape tool at the bottom of the flyout menu. Now, I used to demonstrate this tool with spirals because it can help you fix a broken spiral. So let's say, for example, I want to simulate one of these swirls. Then I'll just go ahead and click and hold on the line segment tool, and I'll select the spiral tool from the flyout menu. And then I'll just go ahead and draw a spiral like so. And let's say I want it to curve in on itself a little more quickly. Then I would press and hold the Control key or the Command key on the Mac in order to adjust the spiral's so-called decay on the fly. And I might end up with this effect right here. And I might move this over a little bit as well by pressing Shift right arrow. Okay, so let's say I want to lift some of these colors here. I'll press the I key to switch to the eyedropper, and I'll just click on this guy. And that's going to assign a fill instead of a stroke, so I'll press Shift X in order to swap the fill and stroke. I'll take the line weight value up to 4 points, let's say, and then I'll click on the word stroke and change the cap to a round cap. All right, having done that, let's say I'm not quite happy with this spiral. I want to make some adjustments. Well, if I were to switch to the scale tool and click right here, for example, in order to set an origin point, and then drag around, I could squish the spiral, or I could squeeze it, or what have you. I could even scale it proportionally if I were to press and hold the Shift key. But that's not really what I want to do. I just want to demonstrate the difference here between the scale tool and the Reshape tool. So for starters, if I were to press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac with this tool selected, I don't get any dialog box. And that's because it really doesn't lend itself to numerical precision. It also doesn't include a transformation origin. Instead, where spirals are concerned, you just go ahead and drag one of the endpoints, and notice how you can now stretch the shape in a way that isn't accommodated by any of the other tools. So you can really customize the heck out of that spiral if you want to. You can also drag on an interior point, although that tends to be less successful, unless what you decide to do is click to set a point, and then select that point with the wide arrow tool. And so, for example, if I were to press and hold the Control key or the Command key on the Mac, I'm going to get my last used arrow tool, which is the black arrow. If I want to switch to the white arrow on the fly instead, then here on the PC, I would press Control tilde. So I just keep that Control key down and add tilde. And then, still with the Control key down, I now have the white arrow tool instead. On the Mac, you would keep your Command key down, and then you would also press Option with Tab. So Command Option Tab is going to switch you back and forth between the tools. Then just go ahead with the Control or Command key down. Go ahead and click on one of those points to select them. And then if you release, in order to switch back to the Reshape tool and you drag, notice you're going to move that point independently of the other ones. So you may or may not find that helpful. But a couple of years ago, Morty Golding, who works here at lynda.com, he used to be a product manager at Illustrator during the time when this tool was introduced. And he took me aside and basically told me this is not the intention of the tool at all. Even though it does this kind of stuff, that's not why it was designed. Instead, it's designed to basically add curvature to a straight segment. So what I'm going to do is press the backspace key, that would be the delete key on the Mac, a couple of times to get rid of that spiral. And I'll go ahead and scroll over to this text right here. And let's say I want to give it a wavy underline. Then I'd start things out by selecting the line segment tool. And then I'll just go ahead and draw a straight line like so, all the way past the D. And I'm pressing the Shift key as I drag to make sure that my line is perfectly horizontal. And I'm going to color this line just like the text. So I'll press the I key to switch to the eyedropper tool. And then I'll just click inside one of these letters that's been converted to a path outline. And because I now have a fill and no stroke, I'm not seeing the line. So I'll press Shift X in order to swap the fill and the stroke. All right, I'm happy with the 1 point line weight, but I'm going to go ahead and give this guy a round cap. All right, now let's say I want to add some curvature. Then one way to pull this off is to go ahead and switch back to the Reshape tool and then click in order to add a point in that line. And now with that point selected, I can go ahead and drag it up in order to bend that formerly straight segment. And if I want to add another point right there, then I would go ahead and click to select it. Now, if I drag down at this point, I'm going to move the other point along with, because they're both selected as we're seeing here. If I want to move this point independently, then I would press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo that move. Then I would press and hold the Control key or the Command key on the Mac to get that white arrow on the fly. I'd click on that point to select it, and then I'd release the Control or Command key in order to switch back to the Reshape tool, and I'd go ahead and drag this point down independently of the others. And I can do the same thing with an endpoint if I like, in order to produce this effect here. And then I can just sit here and move these guys around as much as I like. All right, now let's say I want to give this line a tapering stroke. Then I would go ahead and switch to the Width tool, which is located directly below the Reshape tool. And I might go ahead and double click right about here in order to add a width point. And I'll set the total width value to 6 and click OK. And then I'll add another one, let's say right about here, by double clicking. And then I'll change its total width value to 6 and click OK as well. And that way we get this nicely tapering line. All right, but here's where I'm critical of the tool. Notice if I switch back to my wide arrow tool, which of course I can get by pressing the A key, and I were to click on this anchor point right here, notice that the segment only has one control handle. It's this guy right here. So we don't have a control handle coming out of the end point. So that can end up making for some flat curvature right there at the end points. Even worse, however, notice this point right there that looks like a smooth point. It's not a smooth point. It's actually a cusp point. And that is always going to be the case when you're adding points with the Reshape tool. If you don't want that to be the case, then go ahead and undo the movement of those control handles, select that anchor point, and then click on this Convert to Smooth Point icon up here in the control handle. After which point, I should be able to move one control handle and have the other one move along with, like so. But for my money, the better way to work is that tool that we saw back in Chapter 12 of the Fundamentals course. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch to the pen tool, which you can get by pressing the P key. And then I'm going to click on this anchor point right there to get rid of it. And I'll click on this guy to get rid of it as well. And the result is that we once again have a straight line. Now, if I really want to add curvature just the easiest way possible, then I'm going to switch to the curvature tool, which is a new tool inside Illustrator CC that works a lot better as well. So notice I'll just go ahead and set a point there by clicking on a segment, and then I'll drag it up to add some curvature. Then I'll click here to add another point, and I'll drag it down to add curvature. And now let me show you the difference. If I press the A key in order to switch to the wide arrow tool, and I click on this anchor point right there, it has a control handle. And so we now have two control handles devoted to this segment, just as we should. And if I were to drag this control handle right there, the opposite control handle would move, indicating that we have a bona fide smooth point. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and put that guy back by pressing Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac, because I'm pretty happy with what I have. And then I'll just go ahead and click off the path outline to deselect it. And you know what? I'm going to turn off the guidelines as well. And that, friends, for better or for worse, is how you work with what I consider to be the screwiest of the transformation tools, which is the Reshape tool here inside Illustrator.